Welcome back, everybody. This is the first time I have the man himself, Iskar Jarak, on my channel to talk about some dark things. And I'm super happy because he's like the person who made this whole Malaz tube thing a thing. And I'm super thankful you found the time to actually talk to me. You got up early, and then I kind of delayed you a ton because I had to go and buy stuff and pick up stuff from the post office and do other post office things.
That's all right. I'm a morning person, Raph. Thank you so much for having me. I'm like a humongous fan of your channel and just, yeah, humbled and honored to be here. I love all your videos. I have like, you're one of my favorite channels to watch. And so to be able to just chat with you in the Discord and now to be here on your channel, it's like a dream come true. Appreciate it.
Now you humble me. But yeah, thank you for doing this. Unfortunately, I guess you can't drink because you have to work still, and I can, but I brought myself a special beer today.
Awesome.
Because
I got coffee.
This is a Maibach, which is like a kind of stronger beer. It has 6.8% alcohol, and I just love the way it's done with like having no real label, but having the label engraved in the glass, like printed in the glass. It's really cool. And yeah, also it's stronger than normal beer, so we'll see where that gets me.
You're going for it. Awesome.
I'm going for it. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Wow, I got atmospheric music also because apparently my neighbor is practicing harp, which is cool.
I love it. Oh my gosh, it was predestined.
It very much was. All right, so we wanted to talk a bit about empathy, compassion, and its dark side, right?
Yes.
Grief and all of that.
Absolutely.
Which, I mean, I just finished reading Toll the Hounds for like the third time, and that one is really heavy on the grief.
Yeah. Definitely. I could tell in your last video, it had a very somber tone in your wrap up video for Toll the Hounds too. So, it's just, it has that impact. It seeps into your bones.
It definitely does. It's like, I feel one of those things that I always really appreciate about Stephen Erickson's writing in general is the sincerity. Like you can always like almost feel what he felt when he was writing this. That always comes through, and that especially comes through obviously with Toll the Hounds, and I feel also in the themes, because there's so much about like a parent-child relationships and grief in there. And you have all these poems. Some of those poems are just also hit so hard where you realize that I feel that's sort of dragged me down a little bit as well, because I'm like, it kind of makes you think about your own life and your own way you deal with these things, which, is the best way a book can infect you, I guess.
Absolutely. It's like in some ways you're reading about like what they're like drinking all the infected blood in that crazy town and all that stuff. But like at the same time, you're like, introspecting, about your own life. And that's why I thought this was such a great topic, because, on the one hand, you have those like really empathetic characters in the book, right? Like and compassionate characters. And you do see like the effects of that, or the dark side of that empathy and compassion, because they're like open to the pain, right? And to being hurt, and you like put yourself out there. And then you also see like the opposite, right? Where there's kind of more walled off people, and because they're afraid of pain, or not afraid, or, or avoiding pain, or have been experienced pain in the past, or whatever, a whole, plethora on that spectrum there. But even there, you see that it's like not, you don't get off scot-free by like walling yourself off from pain, right? That there's like then like the consequence of all that. So I just thought that it was a great topic, because that is the, you put yourself out there and you feel, and even, and I hate to just keep beating this dead horse again, but like, even on the the Fellison one, right? It's like that's the hard part, is then it's like you try and be empathetic and compassionate to characters and who, you know, and you want them to turn it around and stuff, and then they can't, and then it's like you feel cheated or you feel pissed off or whatever. And so it's just it's just such an interesting dynamic that you know, that for all the feeling and, you know, whatever, and being a good person or whatever, and like feeling for other people, it really opens you up. And even you see it in the relationships and the loss and all that stuff that you said.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's a bunch of like characters like that grieve in like different ways. I feel like one of the most interesting ones actually for me in Toll the Hounds was actually Diker, or however you pronounce the name.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I pronounced it, but I got nailed for it in the comments. So I don't know.
All right. I just listened to the audiobook, and there they call him Diker. So I stick with that.
There you go.
It may be something else, but you know. Anyway, but I feel like for him, because at the beginning he's already grieving for everything that happened on the Chain of Dogs.
Yeah.
And then when he tries to write it down, and it doesn't work because he needs to come, you know, to terms with his grief in a way. And it's the bard, it's Fisher, the bard, that kind of explains that to him and starts making him tell the story in that more emotional way to come to grips with his emotions, that, you know, gets the whole thing done. Like not done, but out there.
Totally, because he does, you know, I just finished my Memories of Ice stuff, and you know, at the end there, he's like clutching the you know, the rag or whatever the thing is that she wrote her name on and whatever, and his little note that he got. But it was very much like a detached version, like where, you know, that was the first time he talked, I think, since they brought him back from the dead and stuff. And that was more like you know, that was actually like more of a meta thing, I feel like, you know, just to kind of link the two books together more so than his own like emotional catharsis or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. While so I really love that process with Diker, because the more I read the guy, the more I like connect to him. I know a lot of people have like difficulties with him in that way, but this, you know, him being like very much full of grief but not able to show it fully, or not like because he's a rather distanced, you know, mostly distanced analytical kind of person. I feel like for him trying to be human is much more difficult, or like coming to terms with emotions is much more difficult, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that's what you know, that's kind of like you get to see Diker's whole journey, right? Because he's like really introspective and like connecting to List and having these like deep philosophical conversations, and with Lull, right, the other captain guy who was like, you know, somehow super philosophical and had all these profound thoughts, and then he like loses all that, right? And then he goes to like the more detached kind of you know, doesn't want to even get too attached to like, you know, the bridge burners that he's with and all that stuff in Darujistan, because you know, he's been hurt, and so you kind of get that consequence or whatever. He's like the kind of the walking illustration of like, oh my God, this is what happens. You open yourself up, you feel for all these people, you like become close and respect Coltane and do all this crazy stuff, and then they all die, and then you're like, oh, you know, the only one left. And I loved your point in the Toll the Hounds video about like the people who try and go home and stuff, you know, and it's like it never it's because that place is the same, but you're not the same person then that you were. And that's you know, just I thought a really spot on kind of way to put it.
Yeah, but you know, that's the point. It's like you change and you can't really come back. It's this, I guess, like really, I mean, with Crocus, it is like the most obvious, but it also kind of comes across with, you know, Murillo and all the others that like sort of try to get back to that. Totally. What I also found interesting is, and this is like an aspect that I feel is important to look at, is how grief, like obviously the point where that he makes at some point when he's like, everyone grieves alone, even though we have these rituals and we go to funerals together, but in the end, it's each and everyone for themselves need to figure out these things in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And for me, that's like, I'm not like a religious person, right? That's why I like the Malazan stuff anyways, because there's just like, there wasn't like one overarching like religion, or I guess there is like, Hood and the god of death and stuff and the bridge burners or whatever, but it wasn't like, it was I don't know how to do that stuff. You know what I mean? And this book is like a really personal book for me too, because there's also like the mother, like the mother relationship kind of thing going on there too, with like mother dark, like estrangement, I guess, or what happens when your mom's gone, and like, reconciling and all that stuff, or even like, my own like personal stuff with like other family members. And it's like you give the empathy and compassion, you try to, and even going back to the Memories of Ice stuff with Ithkovian, right? It's like, or you give it and you try and understand people and be there for people, and you like to think you're a supportive person and stuff, you know what I mean? But then like you are still like a human being, you know what I mean? And you don't always treat your mom good, and you don't always like, didn't appreciate that. And you can look back in hindsight and realize like, and so there's that whole kind of like personal side of it that really grips me too, because it's like you're reading this thing and you're going, oh my gosh, like this is me and my sister, right? Like, or I don't know.
Exactly, that's the point where it gets super personal. But the mother estrangement thing, I found that like at the end, that really struck me, when you have like Rake forcing Mother Dark to acknowledge him, and then the next scene you have Harlow forcing Stoney to acknowledge him. And that kind of was super important for me, because that shows that this whole like, that this is not just a super epic level kind of thing that Rake and Mother Dark, like, ascendants and goddesses play. This is
right.
This is about each and every one of us and the small kid with its mother in that case. And
yeah, definitely. And dude, just such a powerful thing. And like, if you think about it from like Stoney's end, right? It's like, and I love the whole Stoney and Gruntle side of the thing too. Cause like, and Buke and all those guys, it's like these people deal with tragedies and grief in different ways. Like she was, still kind of checked in from the kind of like financial well-being standpoint and all that, you know what I mean? Like she didn't just go, like, hey, forget it, and like wash her hands of it, but it was too powerful and raw and like connected to the trauma, to like step in and be like an active mom there too. And like, that's why the end is really like cathartic too from her standpoint, is because she was kind of embracing the suck or whatever of it, or however you want to, whatever, I don't know, I'm not a literary poet or anything, but she was like like choosing basically or allowing the pain to happen for the greater good and stuff. And that's like a really powerful thing too, and like must have been like a shit ton of grief, right? Because like here she is like, yes dude, there's this kid, and like, you know what I mean, and like when they hug or whatever, but it's like that must be gnarly for her though, you know what I mean? Because it's like, still, even though she like makes what's quote unquote the right choice, or it's a really powerful choice, it's still like,
definitely. I feel like the main thing that I find very interesting is the overarching thing, because the other big topic of this book for me was obviously addiction and the fight with addiction, which obviously also comes back to like Stephen Erickson and the relationship with his father, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I feel that's sort of the interesting bit there, is like the different ways different people there deal with addiction. You have that situation when they're grieving for Murillo, and Cole and Krupp organizes this non-alcoholic wine for Cole to drink, because obviously they all want to try to make Cole not relapse on his alcoholism.
Right. Yeah.
And then after that, Cole is like, now I need to find some wine that actually works, because the grief is too much and he needs to
drink.
Yeah. And on the other hand, you have that stuff that's Simon Kellick, the Blood of the Dying God, which can be very much read as a metaphor for, once again, for what a lot of people, not everyone who's an alcoholic is like that,
Right.
I guess. I'm not sure if I'm an alcoholic, but
No.
the point is, I try not to be one. But the point there is that you have this idea that it offers, in a way, a reprieve from grief, or from feeling the world too clearly,
Yeah.
which would also be what Hallion does when she drinks, in a way.
Yeah.
Although there it's obviously a different side of it, but with the same in Kellic, it's this, that the suffering itself can become like addictive, and you have this circle between suffering, relief, like in this case this ecstatic relief when they're dancing like mad, and then going back into the grief, and then going back, this vicious circle, I feel, is embodied very well with the whole Seaman Kellic and the dying god.
Yeah. Well, it's all kind of like they're all different defense mechanisms ultimately, right? Because it's like for people to like process this effed up like reality that they live in, and whatever that is, because people have died, because you've seen battle, because you've had like sexual assault and stuff, or whatever, and people like deal with all that stuff, and like you said, in different ways. The addiction side of it is like, that's like a really tough one, because like to have empathy and compassion for folks with an addiction is like your direct, that's like you can kind of metaphorically be putting yourself out there by like opening yourself up to somebody, like opening your heart to somebody, you know what I mean, or something like that. Then maybe they die or something. But like with addiction, it's a much more direct way that you can be like negatively impacted, right? Like on a day-to-day basis by dealing with somebody with addiction, like emotionally. They can steal from you, they can do whatever, and like, and that's when the Itkovian stuff comes in, because you're compassionate to these people that have, that are addicted, and they're, it's in a lot of times, like you said, it's to kind of paper over some deep grief or something, or the state of the world and whatever. But like at the same time, it's like you're having compassion, then they're like doing, they're kind of in the grip of this addiction though, and then it becomes painful for you because you just keep getting burned. And so it's like, that's why it's tough. And even like on the Fellison side, it's like you're compassionate and you're like, yeah, she got screwed over. But then that's where I think like people like Sweet Lard were kind of coming from. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but it's like, but then they like make another bad choice, and it's like, yeah, I get it, you're like this, but then you want them to like get better. And so it's like that anger comes from, I think, a place of like, it's like, oh shit, I cared for this person, I wanted them to do good, then they didn't, now I feel pissed off, because like, and again, that all is kind of tied up in this dark side of empathy and compassion piece.
See, and that's why Rake's old sword is both vengeance and grief, because those are knitted together. It's like you put yourself out for that person. In this case, I feel Fellison is definitely the number one choice. There's more in the book in general. You put yourself out for her, and like I feel shitty for her, bad for her, because she got screwed over majorly.
Yes.
And then I feel hurt when she doesn't do what I think is the right thing.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the whole
that hurt turns into anger. Yeah. I feel
I think honestly that's like what is at the root of all the the hate out there, honestly, is that, because it's like, oh dang, because then you're like, and like that's kind of the whole point too. And that's why I like that you brought up the Semen Kelk thing or whatever that's that, because that's like in some ways is like a sickness that people are, it's like a different kind of hurt or pain or whatever that people are going through. And like that's like I remember and I still to this day like don't really like taking pharmaceuticals and stuff like that, because when I was a kid, like my mom had cancer and she was like taking all these like painkillers, and they really change people when you take all this like pharmaceutical drugs, and it's like for actual like pain though. But I remember like thinking like, oh my God, you're like becoming this drug addict and not having like that empathy and compassion, and being like, oh my God, where's my like real mom, you know what I mean? And like she's like truly dealing with crazy pain and all that, which like as a young kid you don't understand that kind of stuff. But that's like another, you know what I mean? And it's like that's the challenge with addiction, is that that there is the truth, that the kind of root that drives that kind of stuff, or even just the walling off and not you know, having relationships and stuff like that. It's like the thing down there at the bottom is the real thing. It's that's all a symptom of a cause, and the grief comes from that.
Yeah, that's true. Like, and this is one of the things I have the highest respects for Steven Erikson when it comes to that, because alcohol is like this one drug that is socially acceptable everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's especially in fantasy books. When you look at fantasy literature, everyone's always drinking ale or wine.
Yeah.
Right? Like in every book, they're all drinking all the time. There is reasons for that when you have the idea that, you know, beer, everyone was drinking beer all the time in like medieval times, because it was, you know, germ free, or at least less contaminated than water at the time. And that makes sense. But what people oftentimes forget is that the kind of beer those people drank was way less strong than the stuff we're drinking today. They were not getting hammered in the morning. They had like what you call small beer, which has way less alcohol and stuff like that. So it was just to make it, you know, disinfect the water, basically.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's funny. And even Solara, right, was like I think either a drug addict or she was an alcoholic before, right, too.
I think she did basically everything she could get.
Yeah. So, you know, and again, that was like the trauma at the root of it. I didn't realize actually until you brought that up that there's a lot of addiction stuff going on.
It's all over the series all the time. And I feel this is because that's something that you really rarely get in other fantasy stories. There's a little bit of it in going on in the first Law trilogy, where one character is drinking a lot, but it's never, you know, fully addressed as an addiction. It's more like, well, it's connected to her character there, but you haven't read the first Law, right? I keep forgetting.
No, I haven't.
So I'm not going to go off there, but like when you look at like others like fantasy series, there's a lot of people drinking or taking drugs, but the actual like fact of addiction is rarely like brought up in any way. And what Erikson does over the entire thing, though, is that he points out all these different aspects, these different facets, because like every single addiction is, at least at the beginning, is very different. It's unique, it's individual. Like some people just like to party, and after a while they realize that they maybe have
a problem,
made this so much of a habit that it's difficult to get rid of, which is sort of the way I need to be careful that I don't slide down that path. I mean, I'm not the kind of person who sits at home alone and drinks because he's like sad,
right?
Usually I do other things when I feel like that, but I'm someone who's very much a casual drinker, and that can, if you're too casual, that can become problematic as well.
Absolutely.
And you have these people, and then you have people like Hellion, or you have Banniskar, obviously, if that's the way you pronounce the guy.
I have no idea, but yes, I know who you're talking about.
That guy, the priest, the ex-priest. You have that guy, and he's an alcoholic as well. And there's a ton of alcoholics in that series.
Yeah, there is. And it's crazy because, like, you know, alcoholics are like some of the hard, you know, if you're not an addict, I think it's always like really hard to understand the addiction and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And like, I've like never been addicted to alcohol or anything like that, but I used to smoke cigarettes when I was younger, and I started smoking just like as a young kid, like rebellious thing, you know, just kind of into be cool or whatever. Probably I like went back and forth from wanting to pretend to be smarter than I was to wanting to be cooler than I was, and that's kind of the two poles that I've you know, bounced back and forth from in my life still to this day. But I do very much the same thing. I pretend to be smarter and cooler than I am. Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, you know, I'll put on the glasses and then I'm in smart mode, and then I'll, you know, whatever, I'll put on a t-shirt and I'm in but you know, that's how, like, even just getting rid of the cigarettes, which it took me so long to do, you know, I probably smoked from like 16 to 30 and stuff. And it's like, you know, and it's hard to have compassion for somebody if they, you know, you just don't know like what that, like, you know, it messes up your mind. And I watched this like channel called Soft White Underbelly, I think it's called, but it's like this guy and he just interviews like homeless people and like crackheads and just like regular people too, and just like, you know what I mean, gangsters and prostitutes and like every spectrum of life. And you just hear these people like talking, it just like, it does, the addiction changes the like way your brain operates, and it's like everything you know, is all about, you know, facilitating and feeding this like addiction. And so as somebody who's, you know, as an outsider, you're like, dude, what the hell? Like, you're just like, this is a total self-inflicted wound. Like, you just keep on like drinking or whatever, like puke, right? Like at the beginning of Memories of Ice, they're like, bro, yeah, your family died. That sucks. But like, you're just like, you just, you know what I mean? And it's like, and it's hard to get it. And then it's like, and again, they care for him. They're compassionate. And then he's like laying in puddles of his own puke and stuff. And it's like, they, you know what I mean? They feel bad and then they get hurt. And then, so, yeah.
Exactly. I feel like actually looking at these different aspects, and this is what, for example, what makes both Banascar and Hellions so interesting is that they keep going in their addiction and we just follow them through it. And while there is obviously like a negative, like a dark side to Hellions drinking.
Yeah.
It's like I've known people like that. I've known people like that in real life. Well, maybe not the whole like military side of it, but I've known. Sure. I mean, I go to a lot of like metal festivals and metal shows. So you meet these kind of people that are at all of these festivals every time. They're always super drunk, and you, on the one hand, you see how. And like at least at the beginning, it's like you see how completely desolate they are, like how they fall apart and how they have like literally no control over their life at all anymore. And then they come out with all these super funny things at the same time because they are fun to hang around for a while.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the thing there with Hellion. Like I see that, and I mostly have pity for Hellion because she's funny, but yeah.
No, she's like the Nicolas Cage, like Leaving Las Vegas character who's like the total functional alcoholic, right? That like she, you know, is, you know, and is kind of fun and funny and stuff, but like she's also like oblivious, right? Like poor Herb's there the whole time, like ready to ride or die for her, and she like doesn't realize and get it. She's like spending all this other time doing, you know, all this stuff where she could have like a life with a little bit more meaning, and they have like kind of their happy little, you know, thing that happened. Yeah, but like that's the whole thing with her freaking addiction, right? Is that like she misses out on that, even though she's like the total functional alcoholic. I knew people like that. Like my mom had this boyfriend when I was growing up who was like, dude would get up and like, you know, 4:30 in the morning he would start watching TV and drinking scotch, and then like at 5:30 he would go to work, and he would get home at like, you know, 3:30 and go to the VFW and be ready to just smash like scotches all night long and stuff too. It just totally went to work, did all that stuff. They had a great show in America called like, I forget what it was called, but it was all about like addicts and people like that who would get up and like drink like 4 tall boys and then go to work and like be a doctor all day.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, is at least in Germany there's that thing that while I was still talking about addiction, one of the most like the high risk groups for alcoholism are actually politicians.
Oh wow.
Politicians, like your average, you know, parliamentarians, at least in Germany, because you know a large part of what you do, apart from just sitting there in parliament and discussing and voting, is go to all these official functions. You have to open this, you know, swimming for a public pool. You have to do this. You have all these public functions. Like sometimes you have like 3-4 of them in one day, and every time you drink some champagne or whatever, or wine or shit like that, that's part of sort of your job. People look at you askance if you just go there, do your like official like 3 words and cut the ribbon and then fuck off.
Yeah. You got to do it with your toast. They expect you to,
you got to do all the toasting, and that's one of the things why a lot of like politicians are sliding down to this casual alcoholism, because they're like, it's part of the job.
Yep. Exactly. No, and you know, it's like funny to laugh about that, like even in marketing and stuff, you know, like that's a big thing. If you're in anything where people want to sell you stuff, right, then it's like, hey, we'll take you
Yeah.
out and we're gonna go drink beers, and it's like you go to these big events and conferences and everyone's gonna drink beer there, and it's easy to you know, to see that snowball out of control. And you see people who go to these conferences like 10 years later, and some of them are like, you know, have gone a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
too crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, my entire business model used to be built on that, because you go to festivals, you wait until people are drunk and enthusiastic, and then you sell them your records.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at the
I
first Malazan convention, there will definitely be many beers drank for sure.
I know that. It's like so yeah, obviously that's the other bit there. It's like alcohol is a social lubricant. It works like that. But
Absolutely.
there's always that dark side to it, and it's very difficult to you know, walk that narrow path basically. And I found that that's like the other thing. I struggled, like every time I struggle so much with Pinnacell and Ersta Hubbard in Midnight Tides, and even in Reaper's Scale, I struggle with them.
Yeah.
And then they get like completely explained at the opening of Dust of Dreams, when Bug, a male, explains that they were like the god of beer and the goddess of wine.
Yeah.
And that with the abuse of alcohol, because you have that like backflow of because they are personifications in a way of a specific thing.
Right.
With the abuse, with the rise of alcoholism and alcohol abuse, the gods of those drinks have also changed, because, you know, and then he does that, and then they say, and you laugh about it, and then you realize it's, you know, on the religious level, but they're like, at least they haven't outlawed us drink yet, because we would hate to be evil, because once again, if you actually go and you know, go into prohibition, they as gods would have to be like evil gods at that point, and they don't want to do that. But you still see that that way how alcohol and alcoholism have like gone from something that it was, on the one hand, necessity when it comes to beer, and on the other hand, with wine, a more ritualistic approach. Like, you go for that ecstasy on like a ritual level to, you know, reach some other thing, with the bacchanalia and shit like that.
Yeah.
And from that, it kind of went downhill into like the dissolution of dissolution is a word. I keep pronouncing it wrong, because, you know, but yeah, you go to the dissolution that comes with like everyday alcoholism, and because that's where alcohol is nowadays, mostly, like, apart from the body part, that changes the gods of alcohol as well. And I found that like really interesting, this point where you realize that they are not just two ridiculous drunks,
Yeah.
but they are those ridiculous drunks because we as a society,
they're reflections of us.
Yeah, because we as a society have completely lost any responsible way of dealing with alcohol.
Yep. No, that's interesting. Like, that's not one that would have occurred to me, but it's like it parallels, you know what I mean? There's the impacts, or like that give and take between the gods and the humans in general, because they're either like explicitly getting used or getting shaped and molded, or like are impotent unless they get their you know, tributes and whatever, and all that stuff. And so it's like very much this kind of reciprocal relationship, right? And that's kind of like a physical manifestation of that, I guess, which is like pretty trippy to think about. That's why I love watching your videos.
And that's something that's super big also in Terry Pratchett, because he does, and I know Steven Erikson has said that he hadn't read Pratchett at the time. I hope he has read it by now, but I don't know. but because Pratchett has the same thing, and he makes a lot of, like, he obviously has a different approach, because that's this more like satirical, humorous way of approaching it. But he has that storyline in Hogfather, which is sort of the Christmas book, but also other stuff. And the point is, someone is trying to murder Father Christmas. In his world, it's the Hogfather, because for reasons.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's not the point. So how they do that is they make children stop believing in him, so he loses power. And
Uh-huh.
that vacuum of belief is filled up by other things at that point. And they have, this is sort of why I just remembered to talk about that for a moment. It's like, yeah, the point is that at that point, a new god comes into, and you also have that whole belief thing going on in Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. But the point there was, Small Gods is really good, but no, the point was that at that point, because they already have a god of wine, like obviously, but at that point, a god of hangover comes into being, because everyone is like, that makes total sense. We all get hangovers. There has to be that god of hangover.
That's so funny.
That's super funny, but that's what I just felt. Remember when we were talking about Hurst, Hubbard, and Pinocell. Another thing, though, when we talk about grief, to get back to like the topic, Hood in Toll the Hounds, and this is like another and I'm still going to do like a full video on like the Hood death, Discworld death parallels and stuff like that.
Cool.
Because the thing is with Hood, you realize in Toll the Hounds, I feel you realize that Hood is not exactly happy with his job, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
He's the Lord of the Dead, and that means he has to be impartial, and he doesn't want that, right?
Yeah.
When he actually manifests as flesh, and I don't know if there's any blood left in him at that point, but
right.
When he manifests, he steps out of the house and he sees that guard that just is dying of a heart attack at that moment, and he's like, "This once, I will have my way. Fuck the rules," and gives him his life back. And you realize how much like frustration there is in being the Lord of Death, because there's so much injustice in the world.
Totally. Yeah. And like, all the stuff, you can't just go and show up for a beak and be like, no, it's cool, go back to, like, he's not relishing the death. And in some ways he like has a lot of grief over, like all the good people that die. It's like, think about like Bowden and stuff, right? And he like, that's obviously born of the Mybe, right? Like that was all like, she's theoretically like a meta burn still living in that coffin, and that's like, and the beast hold like is within her flesh basically, I guess. And within Hood's temple, though, you know what I mean? So it's like, what a freaking dude. It's not like he's out there like, yes. And like, even that's what I was saying in one of my Memories of Ice videos too. It's like, even in his like body count kind of harvesting mode, right, where he wants, like, that was all basically to have a huge army to take into the sword with him, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's like, even when he was at his most kind of mass murder stage or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
relentless. Let's say relentless.
Totally. Like, that was ultimately still for like a compassionate, if you step back and think about it, like, or a worthy cause or whatever. Yeah,
but at the end, when he actually leaves, and when Ray kills him and puts him into the sword, and then he steps out of the sword because all the souls get out of the sword when Brood breaks it. And Hood's like, I'm not going back to that fucking job. I'm gonna do Hood thing. I'm gonna do my personal things now. I'm no longer the Lord of the Dead. Let someone else. And he even says it, like, let the gods worry about that. That's not my job anymore. I got out. That's like another thing that I realized when I was like rereading Toll the Hounds, like how much of Rake killing Hood. So Hood gets into the sword, then Rake dying, gets into the sword, does his thing. The sword breaks. Hood gets out. How much of that was for Hood to get away from Decimal Tor?
Yeah. I mean, well, that's the consequence of it, right? And that's the ultimate kind of, what's that movie? The Prestige, where the Prestige move.
Very much. And they're like, is that incidental? Am I an evil person for thinking about, like, oh, so he got away from Decim? Or was that part of the plan?
If that is the Prestige move, though, the only problem is, I think Hood is probably like the Hugh Jackman character who now thinks he's gotten away, and we're like about to see like the final little thing where Dawson's gonna catch up to him one day and be like, hey, guess what, I'm like, had the twin and stab him.
That's the point, he's still Dassam, so there's that. But on the other hand, maybe now that Hood's no longer the Lord of the Dead, but just this like angry jackhut, maybe they can actually make up, because they kind of realize that they both played roles at that point.
Exactly. Well, that's why I love that the bridge burners took over like Hood's realm at the end or whatever, or at least are like the guardians. I don't know exactly how all that's gonna work or whatever, but they're like the guardians of the path to the bridge to the other side or whatever. And I can't find the quote, but somebody even says like directly, and I just don't know who says it or whatever, but like they're talking about like how badass it is that it's the bridge burners. Like, can you imagine having like these, empathetic, compassionate dudes there who aren't just sitting there going, yes, more bodies, but are like, oh man, that was like, you went out in a blaze of glory on the battlefield, like bring it on in, you know what I mean? Kind of like,
yeah. I don't know who that was either, but yeah.
But it's just like the idea is like that's like a cool concept, is like that you have this like kind of almost like a, and why would you fear death then if it was, you're getting welcomed in by these like good noble dudes and whatever.
Yeah. See, that's like, that's very true, to have a compassionate death.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. But yeah, I felt like the fact to realize that Hood is not exactly happy about his job
is huge.
And like the kind of cost it is, or like the toll it takes on him to be there.
100%.
And I mean, I've not read Carcanas yet.
I was just gonna say, I can't wait to hear what you think when you read it.
Yeah, I know that's gonna be in there, because I know, there's like all that stuff that you get at the end of the crippled god with these other jackhut were part of Hood's troop there and everything, but
which was so badass when the 13 generals or whatever come back.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, there's like he took on that job. There's a hint of that already in Toll the Hounds, when the undead Tis Edur dragon Tulas Shorn, when he's talking to Calor of all people. And he tries to explain what they did, and Calor is like, the fuck, what did you do, Hood? Like, seriously, why did you actually do that for everyone else, when he's like, the jackhut fought that war for everyone, for all of us to actually, and the only like solution at that point was for Hood to just take that role and take all that. He's sort of on he does a similar thing when come to think of it. He does a similar thing than like Ikovian, right?
Yeah,
because
kind of.
He just goes there and he just like takes them all because someone has to. Yeah.
Well, now I'm really curious to hear what you think about Carcanas, because you get definitely, I don't know if it's in Forge of Darkness or Fall of Light, but you get both the kind of motivations and the mechanics of how he does it a little bit. It's still like obviously friggin' totally nebulous and you don't know exactly, but like but
I will it's already in my Audible it has been in my Audible library for years, actually. I was just waiting for a point when Erickson was like, yeah, I'm working on Walking Shadow, it's gonna come out then.
Well, once you finish the book 10, then you can just dive in. Oh, actually, once you finish book 10, then probably you'll have the Witness out. I think it comes out earlier for you than for me, so
we'll see, because I'm obviously relying on an audiobook, so I don't know when that's going to be out.
I don't know if those come at the same exact time or what, so we might get it at the same time.
We'll see. It actually, sometimes they put out the audiobooks on different Audible services on different times, like for example with Alistair Reynolds. He's an English, like a science fiction author, and his stuff is on like the English Audible like 3 or 4 months before it is on the US Audible. But I'm a professional, right?
Got it.
I have both an American Audible account and a German Audible
good
account.
Perfect.
So I could probably, if it works the same there, I can maybe get it early. We'll see.
Good. Because I think you're onto something. Like, I've never made that parallel before, but as you were saying that, like if you think about what Itkovian does,
Mhm.
You know, he brings in all those people and redeems them and takes their pain, and it's all these like literally broken, right? They're like actually broken, jacked up bones and stuff, like people and all that, and brings them in and kind of like lets them, I guess, freeze them to do their own kind of thing.
And that's like the other thing that where it can maybe come into place, because the other huge thing that is sort of one of those meta things over time, over the Malazan Book of the Fallen mostly, and when you especially come to, you know, Dusty Dreams and what the Eren does when he goes completely crazy. But
Yeah,
it's very much about this like change of systems in a way.
yeah,
And Hood is very much still the hold of death as well, right?
right.
And they start talking about this is sort of like a new world and things change in a way, and that's sort of where the Redeemer comes in, because he's certainly a new like god with having like a completely new, like, both him and on the other hand also obviously the crippled god, but you know, different thing. But the point is, they are having like new domains in a way that weren't there before.
Yeah,
In a way, right? Before that, you know, you have gods of wars, and Fenner goes down, and then the wolves take over.
right.
For a while, Treach is playing at taking over, and shit like that. But because there's always been gods of war, when you see like in Toll the Hound, when that bear shows up, like there've always been gods of war, because war is one of those domains. But redemption hasn't been there before.
Yeah, totally. And that's what's so interesting about what you're saying about Hood too, because like, you know, in some ways, like I think, you know, you have to make this video, but like how Hood is basically the Itkovian of Carcanis, essentially. I think that you've now just kind of patented that, but without even knowing it. But you know, it's in a different way than what Itkovian does, because his is much more like altruistic, right? Like he goes in going like, this is something that like I'm going to do, and it's going to be on me. And, you know, I'm doing it for these people kind of thing. And like, yeah, I don't even have a god who can like relieve the burden or whatever, but I'll just take it on the chin. And like, you know, it was much more altruistic, I think. And like,
on the other hand, that's the point with Itkovian, when he becomes the Redeemer, it's the same thing, because Fenner is gone. And he does
that's what I mean. That's that Itkovian is that like Hood was doing it more. He was like kind of self-motivated for different reasons.
All right, but Itkovian is more like someone has to, and I'll just do it.
Right. And like, and that kind of ties in with what you were saying, like when he wants to hang up his spurs, right, and retire as the god of death, because he like started out almost as like from a self-serving kind of play, not necessarily self-serving, but it wasn't like super purely altruistic, and that's kind of where he actually ends back up a little bit too, is like doing a little bit of being his own you know, lone gun or whatever.
Yeah. I also, I mean, he's a jackhut. We don't know. We don't understand them.
You're right. And actually that makes sense, right? Because he goes back to his kind of solitary state of looking out for number one again. And that's what they always do anyway.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading Carcanis, because, you know, I was like, I want to read them, but I'll wait for the third one. I'll wait for the third one. And
yeah. This will be the year to do it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we know Erickson is a fast writer, so I expect it to be out next year at some point, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. 63 gang for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
We're waiting.
Yeah.
Us and the other 61 are eagerly.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go back to the Vengeance Grief thing, and let's have a look at Calor.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
First of all, I so love that scene at the end of Toll the Hounds, when he's sitting in that bar with the beer he stole, and all the bells are tolling for Rake, who's dead, and he's like, oh, listen, they're playing our song.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, that guy knows grief, doesn't he? Oh my god.
That's the point. It's like he comes across as this major asshole in Memories of Life, which, you know, he is. Like, apart from like what he does, which is not exactly what I mean, like every time he shows up at a council, he is the, I know all that shit because I've done it so many times. He comes,
you guys are idiots. Yeah,
exactly, all the time. And then you have that scene when he's sitting there in his tent and he gets the offer from the crippled god and all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Toll the Hounds, you get so much more, like so many more layers on that. And there's this one scene when shortly before, like when he talks to Spinnock before they start fighting, and he's like, "Does anyone ever ask what this does to me?"
Right.
And he's like, because he at this point he has become like an object lesson and a symbol. He gets completely dehumanized by being this like eternally failing thing. And it's like,
totally.
Does anyone ever ask what that does to the person Calor?
Oh, I know. And it's like, he's smug. He's that's the reason why people don't like him. He's arrogant. He's smug. He's a dick. He's, holier than thou and all that. But it's like, and actually it's interesting because you kind of think like Krull and Draconis and Night Chill at the beginning are like the good guys, right? Because they're there to like damn this guy and save him. But it's like, dude, that's pretty effed up. Like to live forever but never succeed, or even just the live forever part. It's like, to see everyone die and all that stuff. That's like that movie with Hugh Jackman or whatever, where he's like found the tree of life, but then he ends up living forever and he's just like stuck in the tree or whatever. And like and you're by yourself. I mean, it's like, dude, that you must be freaking bitter. And it's like, and he's smug and arrogant because it's like, but he's also, it's like born of, you know what I mean? Like you can master a lot of skills. Think of if you live forever, it's like you could literally go become a sword master. You could read every single book. You could, you know what I mean? So it's like he's smug and arrogant because he's like, I literally have actually done and I am an actual expert in all this shit.
He's the only thing he's not an expert at is diplomacy.
Right. Yes.
Exactly. That one he still that book he still needs to read. But yeah, still that's the point. Is like the toll it takes on him to just keep going, and it's like he's. This is like the interesting bit. There is, can Calor actually give up? Is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. Right? Because he has to live. There's no oblivion for him.
None of that. That's the point. That is the curse like because he's like cursed to ever fail? Does that mean he also has to try all the time, or can he just go and
just become an alcoholic or something?
Nothing?
Yeah,
just I mean, I guess he could just walk into an Azath and be done with it, but then
that would be an option. I think that's like the only option, honestly. I think like he's just such a, I don't know why, but he keeps going, right? He's still like driven because he still wants a throne and a chair, like in multiple different.
That's sort of what I mean is like, can he actually do that? Can he actually give up? Or is part of the curse that he's also cursed to always try? Is like the curse makes him try again and again and again, or is it?
I don't know if that's just a personality trait. You would think somebody would learn though eventually.
It is the personality trait because he was driven because he made it to that place like to be High King in the first place. Yeah, that's the point. And there's like this other situation when he's like also in Toll the Hounds, I guess, where it's like when he's like reminiscing, like ruminating about like all the injustices of the life and the world, and he's like. But he would never give up. He's like, yeah, fuck it. I'm gonna kick it. I'm gonna kick fate in the teeth. And
yeah, exactly. Well, he's like
that kind of person.
Totally. And if he kills all three of the gods, like, will they, if Silver Fox dies, or if Draconis eventually dies, does that free him of the curse or whatever? Or is it like a perpetual thing, independent of what happens to them? But like, I want to make a Calor video because I think he's like, I'm starting to get turned around on him being like an actual sympathetic character, right? And that like he burned all that shit to the ground as a result of them like having already like taken everything away and like corrupted all of his followers and stuff. There's I think some good ice stuff to dig up there because it's like think of how many kids he must have seen buried, or I don't know, like wives that he must have like actually probably loved that died and stuff. Maybe I mean over 100.
That's that scene with the horse, right? When he remembers the horse that died for him.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because like in one of the ice books, I think somebody even says there's like a ghost or whatever that talks about how he was like such a good benevolent ruler and all this stuff.
Yeah, that's also in Blood and Bones.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, he's big in Blood and Bones.
Yeah. And like the destruction on the environment, and he's like, oh, you know.
Yeah, but so yeah, I feel like Calor is like this super interesting character that a lot of us just like that. At least on the outset, you're like, what an asshole. And then he goes and kills Whiskey, and then he goes and kills Whiskey Jack, and I'm like, all right, boss had it coming, but
yeah, exactly.
No, I don't hate Whiskey Jack. That I just feel that for a long time, and this is like more like a meta argument with Whiskey Jack is like, I get it. It just is jarring because in this one case we get told he's awesome, and we don't get shown because all the showing happened before the book started. But
that's Animander Rake. That's why Ruth Ann Bad says about Animander Rake too, right?
It's like so those are that's the things, like they're basically the same thing. It's like all that stuff happened before, just that Rake got Carcanas, where we meet Rake before and see at least more of Rake.
Yeah.
Whiskey Jack, shows up in Path to Ascendancy, so there's that. But yeah, we don't get that for Calor. We at least not so
yet.
far.
Yeah,
not yet. Which
maybe.
Which is on the other hand why I'm super excited for the Gistal, because Malik Grell is another one of those where I'm like, 100%. I'd like to see where he's coming from. And this is like the strength. There's like what happens in Memories of Ice when Paran talks to, and Ganoas Paran talks to Silverfox. It's like empathy has to be free. It has to be like without any like judgment,
right?
And then Erikson goes and like shows us that with Calor, we're like, he's an asshole, he doesn't deserve redemption, and you read on, it's like, oh shit, poor bastard.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's like
he still deserves our empathy.
Totally. It's easy to be empathetic to a person who, you know what I mean, is just like such a good person, and you're like, oh my gosh, what a good dude, he always helps everyone, and poor guy, like loved her and she left him or whatever. But it's like, to be like, that's the hard thing about like the Fellison thing too. And I think that the Gistal is going to be the same kind of deal, because he is actually like, and the ends never like ends justify the means kind of thing. But it's like, if you look at his leadership and stuff, right? Like, I mean, he's like a fairly efficacious job. Yeah. And like, he's brought stability and stuff and whatever. And like, if you think about the precursor stuff, they like waged a genocide against his, or I don't know if it's a whatever you call it, but it's like wiping out of a religious cult. You know what I mean? Before that, well, so it's like,
although the religious cult, as far as I understood it, is pretty brutal because it's about a human sacrifice, but still. So here's my theory about the three emperors that we have.
Yeah,
is why Malik Grell is the one we need. And I have to put like a full spoiler tag on this video.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: is like, so Kellenved is not an emperor; he's a conqueror.
Yes.
He gets bored super fast. So he's the wrong guy to rule the Malazan Empire. He doesn't want that.
Yeah, he's not an administrator.
Exactly. And that's the point. Lassine is also not an administrator. Lassine is old school, because when you read Path to Ascendancy, she's like she's like old Napan nobility.
Yeah, she's like Vito Corleone or something. She's like a mob boss.
She thinks that her like that she has a God-given right, or God's given right in this case, to rule. It's just because of her inheritance.
Hereditary, yeah.
It's hereditary. Fuck it. And the other thing is, Malik Grell, he is the administrator that an empire actually needs. Like, he's probably not the kind of person who will like build an empire, but he's certainly the kind of person you need to actually organize that thing. Totally. So I'm really looking forward. I'm really looking forward to that one.
I agree with everything you said, except for I'm depressed, because you just want to be able to have it be black and white and just be able to actually hate the guy. But no, you're right. I mean, even just looking at his like climb to power, right? The way that he manipulated all those different factions to kind of create some stability, right? Because like that was a pretty gnarly like 3-way or plus war in Return of the Crimson Guard, that like all the stuff that happens basically like between Reaper's Gale and Toll the Hounds, I think, or whatever. And to just get it pretty much back to just like operational within like a couple months with like minimal, you know, like kind of delays or disruptions or whatever is pretty remarkable. So yeah, I want to hate the guy, but I'm guessing we're gonna like see him get humanized just like Calor.
Yeah, that's true. Like the other thing is like I'm looking forward to also doing like a reread of the Ice books, because
yes,
it's so interesting to look at those different perspectives on the same character.
Yes,
it's super like I still remember it super much with Lessine, because she is so much more likable when Esselman writes about her.
Yeah, totally. And you feel bad for her.
You feel super bad for her. It's like, yeah, you totally. Even when you read Path to Ascendancy, and she's like, I would get pissed off with Kellenvet all the time, because what an asshole.
I don't know if they did this on purpose, but it's like you get like one side of the story in the 10 big books or whatever, and then it's like Ice peels back the curtain on the actual like origin stories of all these developments and stuff, and it's never like the story that you thought you knew, and so it's which is what I love about it. Yeah, it's fun. When you do that, we got to do some Ice collabs, because there's so much good stuff that like Ice stuff that I want to talk about.
We need more people talking about all the Ice stuff, because he still gets like sort of and I love that point when Erickson said it's like, is it in Night of Nights? This is not fan fiction.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Not, no, he probably knows more about what Shadow Throne thought than Erickson ever did. Or
exactly, 100%. He said he hits him up for like notes and all that stuff, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's this and that." So yeah, they're legit. Return of the Crimson Guard's a lot of fun.
I know. I mean, I've read them all once, but I need to reread them, because there's so much Malazan, and I'm like, stuff melts together, and I'm like, was that in this book? Was that in this book?
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm lucky just to be able to remember stuff, Raph. So I'm with you.
Yeah, my memory is terrible, I can tell you that. There was one thing I really wanted to talk about. I'm trying to remember, so I'm just gonna drink a sip of beer. You want to say something while I drink and think about what did I want to talk about? I wanted to go back to Death and Altar, but that's not.
Yeah. No, I love the Sem storyline and the whole Lord of Tragedy thing, and especially after reading the Path to Ascendancy stuff. But like, there's the whole thing about Envy being tied in, and like, if she would have showed up, would Hood have not kind of manipulated Desem when they were chaining that piece or whatever. I mean, he is just and actually that's why I like the Ice stuff too, is because like you get the whole Traveler storyline, which is like a little bit different than what we see of him, or it's a different perspective, I guess, or it's written a little bit differently. But when you get him like through Eriko and Kyle's perspective and Return of the Crimson Guard and all that stuff, and he seems like a little bit more hardened and badass and less mopey, kind of. I don't know.
And this is like the other thing that I found super interesting. I wasn't like, I think on my second reread, I had read Return of the Crimson Guard by then, but I completely missed that one. But Eriko gets at least mentioned by name in Toll the Hounds.
Is that right? Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, he gets like, so that's the things like when we have a Traveler like Desem and Karsa and Samar Dev traveling, and we have her point of view, and they are like talking to each other. And she realized that that he has starts to be friends with Karsa Orlon,
right?
And mentions that he has met like an even truer blooded like old Toblakai named Eriko, and that's where the name gets from. And that's about it.
That's
sort of the explanation why he like finds it so easy to be friends with Karsa, because he knew Eriko. Although obviously Eriko is almost the complete opposite of Karsa.
I know, it's not like they're like peas in a pod from a personality standpoint, that's for sure.
No, of course not. Yeah, but that's sort of the thing like that, where Eriko gets dropped like once. And I'm super looking forward to rereading all the Esselman stuff, because that's been like I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. And yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about Decem, he's like that dude holds on to grief like a dog with a bone and just doesn't let it go because his daughter gets taken out and then he like declares war, you know what I mean? And just like, and that
it's like the other thing is his daughter actually dead? Because in Deadhouse Gates, she's lying, she's in the Azath, so she's still like, we don't know.
And somebody put her there. It wasn't him, right? It was, oh no, he made a deal with Shadow Throne, I think, to I don't remember, but somebody else put her in there. It wasn't him, I think. So I don't know if he knows her. Someone will let us know in the comments, I'm sure.
That's probably Nifluraka will say, oh, you got it all wrong.
100%. Yeah.
Which, we probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but going back to the dark side of empathy and compassion, I feel like the really important thing, now I know where I wanted to go. Good. We're going to get economic here.
Okay.
So I feel, and this is the thing, when we come to this, like, empathy and compassion have to be without judgment, have to be without it, like an exchange of things.
Yeah.
And we see, on the other hand, that the Talana Mas, or the Imas, basically.
Yeah.
They are very empathetic and they're very compassionate. They don't ask for a return. And the thing there is that where I'm driving at is that it is our like way of thinking as human beings, which is attacked there because obviously Silver Fox, who says that it has to be without judgment, is partly IMAS. Yeah. And it is our like way of thinking in at this point, capitalist world. Although I guess it, predates stuff like Adam Smith. But the point is, we live in a mindset that thinks everything in contracts and in the terms of exchange.
Yeah.
In transactions, in the terms of transactions, exactly. And that's why we fight and why we struggle so much with the idea of giving 100%. Empathy without getting anything back.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. It's like, that's the whole, main Itkovian quote or whatever, is that when we give compassion, then we set it on the scale and you want someone to like fill up the other side. Like that was the thing I was saying about, like even just like dealings with the people with addiction and stuff, or the reason why people are bitter about Bellison, it's like you paid your price, right? Your compassion, your empathy. I did that. I said that I supported you. I loved you, right? Like I did that. And then you freaking slapped my hand away, right? And that was your side of the deal. I want my goods and services that I bought and paid for by treating you right. Then I wanted you to step up and do the right thing, right? And it's that total kind of, where the reality confronts the expectation, and then you're like, oh, well, I just got screwed then, right? Because I just paid for nothing. And that's like the whole entire deal. I invested in you, and then you still like, and like that's the whole thing with like even in personal relationships. Like I have, people with addiction in my life and stuff, and you're like, and then you help them. And you want them to do the right thing. It's like, you're falling on hard times. I gave you $500 because you said you really needed to pay your rent. Then you like bought drugs and stuff. And then it's like, and then I'm like, it's hard to come back and be like, oh my God, I like still feel like bad for you. And you still do. And you understand like where that comes from. But it's like, should I then still continue to like help financially and stuff? And it's like, there's that whole kind of, and even there, I guess, is like the, like you're saying, the scale. It's like you're putting the pain up against the like benefit, and you're going, and doing that kind of cost benefit analysis. And that's like what's so hard about Tavor's thing, right, is that there's like zero balancing on the other scale. They're not getting, well, I guess Kamen'Zad wrote a book about him, I guess, is the best that she can say. And we don't know what the end of the story is. We don't know what the end of the deal is, but there wasn't any like, there wasn't a lot of reward back. Like he didn't do anything to earn it. He didn't do anything to be worthy of it necessarily, other than just the fact that he's just the victim of this thing. And so it's like you said, it's just all transactional, and that's maybe a function of our society.
And like I have this problem. There's like, because he does, like Erickson goes and does that, like the IMAS don't do that. They just give compassion.
Yeah.
And I guess it kind of gets super speculative because, you know, he sometimes has said that he has based sort of the IMAS on like an idea of the Neanderthals because they're like not human, but like a different offspring, like offshoot that, you know, ended because we were meaner and more asshole-y and shit like that. But, you know, we don't know they didn't also think in exchange. That's sort of the question there is like, it would be great if we would not always think in transactions in like everything. And it is super fucking ingrained. That's a problem there, right? It's like
totally
everything we do, we think like, what do I get for it? Like true altruism is super difficult to get to.
100% in this world. Like even in like, you know, you look at like the generosity and stuff that happens and it's like the foundation with your name on it kind of thing. You know what I mean? So it's like even in your most generous act, there's like a whole element of like ego and everything else like baked in. And that's like a whole Western thing that we could make a 2-hour video on in and of itself, right? It was like, but you know, and so yeah, that's the hard part. And that's why I love these books, because that's like something to strive for, right? Is to like be truly empathetic. And that like doesn't mean, I think, you know, and that's the other thing that I think needs to be said is like being empathetic and compassionate doesn't like, you know, mean writing a blank check to constantly be, you know what I mean, hurt or whatever too. It's like you can be empathetic and compassionate and like also still like recognize you know, negative aspects of stuff that happens.
Of course, yeah. I guess that's like the other thing, like, and this is like what makes it so difficult, like even if you do it, like apart from like empathy and compassion, when it comes to all these other things, like you do good for the morally suspect reasons,
right?
You still do good, and for the person that receives it, your motives don't matter.
Yeah,
it's like that's like the other side of it.
Totally. And that's like why people still advocate for markets and stuff like that, is like that you can set up the incentives to like achieve the desired outcome, even though it was like predicated on like, you know, setting up a system where like everybody's selfishness led to this optimal outcome. You know what I mean? It's like, is it good that, you know, it's like that you can kind of use these carrots and sticks or whatever to kind of beat people into doing the right thing, or like, you know, and that's like, I do all this, diversity and inclusion stuff in our like corporate environment at work and whatever, and like that's what our philosophy is there too in some ways. It's like, you know, get people to do the right thing first, and then like worry about getting them to agree with you about the reason why they did that, you know, down the road. If we can at least just get people behaving better, then like
that's like the point, is like, as long as there is injustice, you can fight, and then we can worry about making them understand that shit later. That's
totally. It's like, hey, if doing the right thing will make you money, then you'll do it, and then I can worry about like winning your heart and mind down the road.
Probably. But yeah, see, that's like to bring it back to Malazan, that's sort of where the whole like Clip thing comes from. I mean, I know Clip is one of those characters that is super difficult to like. I don't like him.
Super difficult.
But very much like his drive is very much based on this like transactional thinking.
Totally.
He's like, 100%. I am the mortal sword of the black-winged lord, so he fucking owes me. And Amanda Rake's like, I never said I was a god, fuck you.
Totally.
And then he goes and kills himself, or gets himself killed. And Clip is like, well, at this point he doesn't care, because, you know, he's already the dying god. But, you know, still, the drive there is all about this transactional thinking. It's like, he owes me because he is my god, and I took on this job for him.
Totally.
It's like, yeah, but you decided to do that. It's not like he asked you.
Right. Yeah, and like that's why you're right. The IMAS stuff is super powerful. I think like when the memories are going into the ground and memories of ice or whatever. There was like all these people who were talking about Tool and how he like walked away from the ritual and whatever. He like, you know, didn't go, and like they weren't all pissed off that he like kind of went and did his own thing after they all became, you know, went through their little preservation thing. And like they always wondered like, hey, I wish I would have like went over and you know, said stuff until it wasn't like they were all pissed off that he picked the other team, you know what I mean, or whatever.
But and that's like the other thing. It's very much this transactional thinking is very much within the Malazan world of the overall Malazan world. The transactional thinking is very much a human thing. The IMAS don't do it. The Tist Andy very much don't do it. But you have that point also in Told the Hounds when they remember when the people from Pale and Mott and so forth came to Anamander Rake and like wanted to make a deal with him so he would help them fight the Malazans.
Yeah.
And he's like, we don't make a deal. You ask and we decide to do it.
Yeah.
This is not about making a deal. This is not an exchange.
Totally. And like, even, you know, what did they give out of it? They're the least transactional of them all, right? They're out there waging all these wars and then like not keeping any of the loot, not holding any of the territory. They're just like, and then move on. Like they got Coral, I guess, and that's like about it, but they weren't doing it for, you know, that was like as close to altruism.
They do it because they decide it's the thing to do.
Yeah. Totally.
And they're not asking for a return. That's the things. Like, I mean, obviously, who understands the Chain Chamal's reasoning for doing things, but they're also not like a transactional, you know, kind of species.
Totally.
The Jagat totally are not. It's a very much a human thing. And to look at how that is like very much ingrained in human nature to think in transactions and to think that way.
Yeah, totally. And that's what makes Tavor so profound, right? Because she's like one of the.
She doesn't do that.
Yeah.
She breaks that mold.
Yeah.
And it's super important that sort of, although it's kind of questionable, but I just read it today, so I'm still thinking on that. I still need to make my video for today, but that's the point. When they have the reading in Letheras.
The big one.
The big one.
Yeah.
And she doesn't get a card. And that's important because what the cards do is like they put people into this power structure. And she's the one who is outside of that, right? She's outside, and that's why she can do that, because she's not in that whole like give and take power structure thing. She can do the right thing because she's outside.
Totally. No, that's gnarly. I didn't think about that. That's cool. Dust of Dreams, man. Underrated book, right?
Yeah, it's like I didn't like it the first round. I'm getting to understand more of it.
Yeah, good.
I mean, they get more difficult to come to terms with from like book to book. It's like Dust of Dreams is not exactly an easy read.
No, definitely not. Pretty brutal stuff. They're all pretty brutal. The last three, you know, I saw someone who was just reading the Bone Hunters, and I was like, that's the one that's like the last one that's really like super just like fun. You know what I mean?
I would say Reaper Scale is still pretty fun.
It is. It has some dark little aspects, but there's some ride or die funness there.
It does. Yeah, but you know, the Bone Hunters and Reaper Scale are still like sort of fun, and then he just pulls out all the stops. He's like, yeah, right, I'm gonna hurt your feelings brutally.
He's like,
with
I
an
hope
axe.
You hope you got your Kleenex. Here we go.
Yeah. And I feel that's sort of like the interesting thing that I so enjoy about all of the Malazan Book of the Fallen is like that it goes to all these places and makes you go and think about all these like deep emotions and figure out that stuff, and to be aware that like and that's the other thing when we come back to Itkovian, right? So he's like compassion personified, because he takes everyone.
Yeah.
And that makes him so very, very vulnerable, and makes him almost succumb to the dying god. Because if you just, you know, take everyone and be empathetic to everyone, but you have no defenses, that will completely overwhelm you. And that's why you need someone like Seerdomin or
something. Yeah. Or you mean a friend?
Segder Travos Sirdomin.
Yeah,
the guy who, the guy who's in the end he's sort of saint and protector and sort of and all of that. Like that's the point. Is like you need that, because if you, and this is like the life lesson out of that, is like if you are that open to all these dark things in life, and to, you know, kind of bring it back to the dark side of empathy and compassion. It's like, I'd like to be empathetic and compassionate all the time. I try to.
Yep.
But you do that, and it fucks you up real bad.
Yep.
And the Redeemer Itkovian does that, and it really fucks him up real bad when, you know, the dying god with Selin comes and almost takes over. So you need to realize, and I feel that's sort of the lesson there. It's like being empathetic and compassionate is the right thing to do, but you need to like at least have some rudimentary defense mechanisms in place, or it will completely destroy you and take you over, because that's like the results. Like if he doesn't have that, the dying god takes over, people are still going to be redeemed in quotes, but in the way of the dying god, which is that way of the way of addiction, of terminal addiction.
Totally.
Which,
no, I love it. I think you're absolutely right. That's why I like, you know, we call it the dark side of empathy and compassion, but really like when you talk about something being the dark side of something or the flip side of something, you're talking about them all being one thing, right? That they're, you know, that to be empathetic and compassionate is to embrace like pain. And like if it's Covian goes big and takes in all, you know, and shows so that much compassion, then he's also you know, literally just nothing but pure pain, and then you're, you know, exposed to total destruction basically. And so it's you know, that's like kind of the whole point, is that when you open yourself up, you're you know what I mean? It's like that it's all one thing. They are flip sides of the same coin. To be compassionate means to get hurt. There's gonna, you know, that you're gonna be compassionate to someone, you're gonna care about someone, they're gonna die, they're gonna cheat on you, they're gonna screw you over, they're gonna do something stupid, you know. And like the whole point is that like you know, that it's for me, it's more of an aspirational thing more so than a roadmap, because we're not all going to be able to be Tavor with zero defense and just do that, you know, compassionate thing regardless of how much shit we get for it. But you know, it's something that we can aspire towards.
That's the thing. Like the other part where you say the dark side of it is like you always, you know, associate like dark side with like bad, wrong, evil, or whatever. That's not the point. We have to go into the dark side. We just have to be aware that this is like more the dangerous part. It's like, you know.
Yeah, totally. The dark side isn't like curled Ghislaine.
Games.
Yeah, I like thinking of the dark side maybe as Mother dark side, where there's no inherent evil there. Just go for it.
Yeah, it's still like dangerous, but it has to be done.
Yep, totally. No, and like, dude, you know, to that's why I wasted so many 30-something years before I started reading fiction, because it like took me reading about lasers and fireballs and dragons and like demon god, like dying marionette puppets getting bled into from the blood of a, you know, whatever, to really go, oh my God, like my relationship with my mom was shit, my sister, oh, what did I do? You know, like, and to like be a better, like try and be a better person. So that's you can have fun and you can grow.
This is like super important, because that's sort of what Erickson said when I spoke to him in that one interview we had. Is like he wanted to be like the reading experience of the Malazan Book of the Fall, that kind of like hero's journey where you go into this dark place and you come out changed, and you maybe hopefully are a better person. And I feel that's exactly what you meant, like what you said right there. It's like you realize all the things you fucked up, and maybe you come out on the other side like, maybe I should change all these things, or like try to make amends where I can.
100%. And like just understand more, like, and even just to bake that in, it's like you don't got to go do like a 12-step program, like write a letter to all these people you screwed over, but it's like it makes you at least think like, hey, like, you know, I get it more, and I'm gonna be more just like conscious in my interactions and stuff, and you can like just be more deliberate about, you know, like, and go, oh my God, I was probably you know, it's not like you were maliciously being a dickhead to everyone, but it's like if you were just like not you know, not being cognizant, and this gets you to introspect so that you can be more deliberate, then and you get to shoot all these fun lasers and fireballs, then God bless.
That's the point. Like, this is what you always say, what I always say is like, go there for the lasers and fireballs and just wait for the other stuff to hit you.
Yeah.
But just, you know, don't think too hard. It's lasers and fireballs and dinosaurs with swords. Totally. The fuck are you waiting for?
I love the Mike's read along too, because he's like, I don't know what the hell I'm reading, but I like it. He's like, this stuff's cool. This is like weirding me out. It's like,
yeah, he's like, what dinosaurs with swords.
Exactly. So,
I love that. He's like, what? Why didn't anyone tell me? This is like
dinosaurs with sword arms.
Not think of it. Yeah.
Yes. So, that's what I'm saying. There's something for everyone.
That's the point. It's like, no matter what you like, there's so much crammed into the Malazan Book of the Faun that you want your serious, like super serious fiction. Yeah, it's in there. You want your like laser and fireballs and dinosaurs with swords. It's in there. You want all your like military drills and shit. That stuff is also in there. It's like, just, you know.
Totally. Yeah. No, and like the Malaz tube is starting to reflect all those various facets where you got people honing in on different areas. So it's been pretty badass. So
that's the other thing that I love about like the Malaz tube part, and I feel we should talk a bit about that, and then we're probably gonna end it because I don't know. I don't even know what time it is. Anyway,
it's 9:30 for me, so we're in good shape.
All right. That means it's like 6:30 for me, I guess.
All right.
So basically it means I have like 30 minutes to run to a shop. So let's do like 10 minutes to 15 minutes, and then I run because my shop is like the shop is 200 meters, so I can do that.
Sounds good.
All right. So now the point with the Malaz tube part for me is that it's so many people dissecting like all these different aspects of this one piece of fiction.
Yeah.
And looking at all these different aspects and reacting to each other and creating new like ideas and stuff. Like you do something, I watch it, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna make a reaction. I'm gonna go off of that. And then Ruth and Bud comes on like, you guys got it completely wrong. And then Nifrog's like, yeah, but I got the receipts because that's what he said there in this one sentence.
Totally. No, it's so fun. It's like a dream come true. And like, you know, everybody has their own perspective, right? And so everybody's bringing their own kind of experience and expertise and, you know, points of view and all that stuff. And so it's just like, so cool because there's literally so much to plumb. And I'm like reading it now for the fourth time. You know, I've read some now 4 times and some only 3, but it's like it just gets better and better because it's like even on the 4th time I'm like, oh my God, like that. Or and then like you said, you'll say something and I'm like, or even just like today, right? Like the whole Hood Itkovian parallel that I'm now like super subscribed to that to that comparison. And like that's what it's all about. You know what I mean? That you can't freaking get by just sitting in a quiet room reading a book by yourself. And that's what's made this like, well, you need the subject matter that has the depth to enable it. But then you just need the good people to come along and plumb those depths. And that's where we're at. And it's the bomb.
Yeah. And that's like the thing, like we just, I mean, basically, and this is where it all started was when you put out this, like, can you actually make like a synopsis of the Malazan Book of the Faun?
Yes.
And we all started there. Ruthen started there. Counselor started there. I started there. Niflrock started there. We all started there. And then it just kind of bloomed from there. And we already, like, you know, we were already talking before that, but now we're talking openly and other people see that. And it's like, oh, it's so easy to join in and just keep on going.
It's awesome. And we got like, you know, it's round the world, round the clock. So what else could you want? We got all the bases covered. It's bomb. Well,
we need someone in Africa. That's sort of like the one continent we don't have yet.
That's true. Yeah, we definitely need to get
Although
that going.
we do have someone on the server, on your Discord server. We have at least one person from South Africa.
Quezzy's from South Africa. Yeah, there's a couple South Africans that have commented on videos before. My wife's South African, so I'm an honorary South African, but we're not going to count that. We want a real, honest to goodness Africa Malaz tuber.
We might also need one of the Australians to actually make videos.
Yeah, that's true. There's a million. Dude, Malazan is huge in Australia. I'm surprised. So yeah, we need that. But then we can have the kind of global collab. That will be dope.
You know what would be really cool? Now we got to do this. Once we have all of these people, we have all of the time zones covered. We do like a 24/7. We do it like a 24-hour Malaz collab, where people just tune in when they wake up, and we just talk about Malazan for 24 hours straight.
Yes, that would be awesome.
That would be the perfect thing to do.
Just for whoever's awake, they join the Zoom at that time.
Yeah, exactly. You just join, and then we keep on talking about Malazan for 24 hours.
Yes, that would be badass.
All right. I feel that's sort of the call to action for everyone who watches this video to, if you're in one of the time zones, we don't have people yet making Malazan videos. Or if you want to do your first Malazan video by joining us, we're going to do that at some point. So
yeah,
join.
You're on the fence. Join the conversation, man. If you're even debating making a video, just make one.
Yeah, exactly. And join Iskar's Discord, because that's where we set this shit up.
Yep, that's where we coordinate. So that's just the kind of the forming up area that we all kind of go to. So
yeah. All right. Man, it has been so much fun talking to you again.
I know, I could talk to you forever. Honestly, thank you so much for having me on. Really, I'm a humongous fan. You're a great friend, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. So it was a ton of fun.
I can say the same. I can only say the same. That's basically it. So yeah, thank you.
All right.
All right, that's